Welcome back to a new episode of Speaking Tongues. I'm here today with Alexandra. Alexandra is originally from Dublin, Ireland, and she now lives in Valencia, Spain. She works as a mentor with the Endangered Languages Project and is a PhD candidate at the University of Valencia. How are you today, Alexandra?
Really good. Thanks so much for having me. It's really nice to be here.
I am delighted to talk with you today, and I'm so happy that you were able to make this time. And we're going to get into it. So,
Brilliant.
I like to start each episode with the same question, which is what is your first language and which languages have you learned to speak?
So the my first language, the language that my parents spoke to me growing up was English. I learned Irish then throughout my childhood. It was a subject I learned in from primary, well, actually from preschool onwards. I started learning Spanish then in secondary school. I did a degree in languages, and that was Irish, Spanish, and German. So I also learned German. And when I was on my year abroad as part of that course, I spent a semester in Santiago de Compostela in Galicia. So I got to do a basic Galician course too. And I've done basic Norwegian. And then for the past 3 years, I've been living in Valencia and have been learning Valencian since then. So I would say the four that I kind of now use most and can speak most fluently are English, Irish, Spanish, and Valencian. But
Oh,
a few others have kind of been there along the way as
I
well.
love that. We love a true language lover and student of languages around here. Of course, of course. So tell me about, English was your first language, and you said your parents spoke to you in English, and
Mm.
obviously you grew up in Ireland. Were there other people that you maybe grew up with who maybe their first language was Irish or their parents spoke to them in Irish? And tell me what that dynamic was about.
Yeah, so I grew up in a small town just outside of Dublin called Downach Bahach, and English is very much the dominant language of the community there. It's starting to change now. There's a lot more, you hear a lot more Irish in the town now than you did even when I was younger and growing up 20 years ago, because they now have an Irish medium school in the town, and that didn't exist when I was growing up. So there's definitely been some progress, and you do hear some families using Irish. But English is very much the dominant language. I did hear a lot of other languages growing up. Some of my neighbors were Polish, so I heard a lot of Polish on the street as well. And when I visited their houses, and every summer a girl came and stayed in our home from Belarus, so I heard a lot of Russian over the summers as well. And we used to call my grandma babushka and things like that. So yeah, there was a lot of languages around, and many, many more languages around the community. But the main one for me would have been English.
Yeah. Do you think that for you, having so much exposure to these different languages in your community, did it spark something in you? Do you think that was the fuel that made you so interested in different languages?
Definitely. And I don't think that's something I really thought about when I was younger, when it was happening, that it was so normal for me to hear my friends speaking different languages at home, for Irish to be a part of my life in some, to some extent or another. It wasn't something I thought about. And I started going to summer camp as a child in Irish. And I just took these as fun things to do. I didn't think about how important they would be for my life, but they have turned out to be central.
Yeah. Yeah. Irish summer camp. What are we doing there? Tell me
Yeah.
about that.
So I started going when I was about 11, and first it was summer camps in Dublin. And I'd go into the city every day, and they weren't residential summer camps. So I'd go in maybe for the morning and there'd be classes, and then in the afternoon there'd be sports, and then on some evenings there would be maybe karaoke nights or dances and things like that. So that was amazing. And then when I was about 14, I started going to summer camps in the area of Ireland known as the Gaeltacht, which is where there's a higher proportion of Irish speakers. And Irish in the areas that I was very much the dominant language of the community. And yeah, it was just living through the language completely, living in a house with people from the area, with a group of other teenagers from Dublin. A lot of the people that were in my houses were from Dublin. And yeah, just playing sports, doing art, dancing, meeting people, all the kind of normal teenage things, but through Irish for the first time, which was amazing for me.
How fun.
Yeah, it really was.
Do they
It
have
really
that
was
for
an amazing
grown-ups?
experience. They do, yeah. They have, you can go and do immersion summer camps in different Gaeltacht areas still as adults. So I'd really recommend that to anyone who wants to learn Irish who's listening.
It's me. It's me. I want to do it. I have to tell you, and I probably told you this before, but like something about the Irish language, just I swoon listening to Irish. I think it's so beautiful. I think that Irish given names are so beautiful, and I'm dying to go to Ireland someday and really experience the culture because it just seems so cool. So I might be swooning over the course of this episode. I'm just telling you that to say that now. But tell me about the language. Tell me about the Irish language. Tell me how is the language constructed? How are we using it? What are some of its hallmarks? Is it tonal? Is it agglutinative? And those linguistic terms, and
Mm.
how are we forming sentences and pronouncing letters and all of that juicy stuff about
Mm-hmm.
Irish.
I'll do my best with the linguistic terms myself, but it's one of the six currently spoken Celtic languages. So that's Irish, Manx, Scottish Gaelic, Cornish, Breton, and Welsh. And it's especially closely related to Manx and Scottish Gaelic. So there'd be quite a high degree of intelligibility between them. And the word order is verb, subject, object. So we might take a sentence like, Olin she ishka drinks she water. She drinks water. Nouns can be masculine or feminine. Kind of interesting bits in Irish that we don't see in kind of a lot of languages that people might be familiar with would be something that we call prepositional pronouns or inflected prepositions. So you can see that to some extent in Spanish. To say with me, we say conmigo. So the preposition and the pronoun come together into one word. That happens with Irish. So, for example, to say with me, we add le, which is with, to me, may, and it becomes lum. It becomes one word. So that's something you see quite a lot in Irish.
Mm-hmm.
We also have initial mutations. So that's little changes at the start of words that get triggered by certain structures. So if we have the word ban, which means woman, B-E-A-N, ban. If we say the woman on van, ban changes to van. We have to add a little H after the B.
Okay.
And if we said, or the woman has a bottle, top Widdale Egon man, and we add an M before ban.
Oh.
So they're all examples of initial mutations. We have shavus or lenition and uru, which is eclipses, and just little changes at the start of the words that are triggered by certain formations. We have 5 cases, the 4 that are in German: nominative, accusative, dative, genitive, and then also a 5th, which is the vocative. So if you're talking about someone, let's say if we take the name Sean, for example, if I'm talking about Sean, then I can use Sean as it is, S-E-A accent N. But when I'm talking to Sean and I'm addressing Sean, I'll say, hi, a Sean. So we add a H and an I there. So that's the vocative case.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So in the case of my name, for example, which is, Alexandra, and there is an Irish equivalent, but I usually use Alexandra, then it won't change. But in the case of Irish language names, then we can see those changes.
Yeah. Can we talk about names and maybe where those changes are, especially because I love Irish names.
For sure, yeah. So when it comes to names that are a lot of the names that are a lot of masculine names, like Sean or Shosef maybe, which is, or Mihal, they'll take a H and which is that Shevu that I mentioned, they'll take a H and then we add an I at the end to make it quail. I'm trying to think of the word for quail. Slender. So we slenderize. We have these slender vowels, I and E, and we slenderize these masculine names when we're addressing the person. For a lot of women's names, it will just stay at it as it is, but maybe add a H at the beginning. So if we have Breda, for example, then it would be Avrida when we're talking directly to Breda.
Okay. Now, as an English speaker, where do you see similarities? And well, obviously the differences are there, but as a kid, you're learning Irish. You're learning the Irish language for the first time. Where do you see similarities with the two languages, and what is that like to go from one to the other with such different structure and cases and these kind of changes with the names? Like, tell me about what that was like.
When I was in, they kind of introduce a lot of it through immersion, at least in primary school, I remember, and in preschool even. We did songs and we learned poems and we looked at the different verbs in context, but nobody really said this is lenition and this is eclipsis and this is the vocative case or anything like that. That comes later. So as you learn, for the first maybe 6 years, especially in primary school, you're just kind of getting the language thrown at you a little bit. And then in secondary school, every year you sort of start unpacking it a little bit more and look at the kind of specific grammar rules around what changes you have to put in. So when you do your first exams in school, when you're 15, 16, you're not marked too harshly for making mistakes on those little points. And then by the time you're finishing school, we have exams called the Leaving Cert when you're 18. And that's when you start to they start being a bit more careful around when you're adding a H, when you're not, things like that.
I see. I see. This is so cool. I think that, like, I never thought, and this is just me because
Mm.
I'm doing this show, but I'm still learning and I'm
Mm.
correcting a lot of the things that I grew up thinking and thought were a certain way. And I think I never thought about Irish in common in like present usage. So when I was a kid, not now, I know better now, but when I was a kid, I remember thinking, okay, Irish, Ireland, everybody speaks English and it is what it is. And maybe Irish is kind of, the language of poetry or folk music or something that, people don't really touch anymore. So I love hearing that it's alive. I love hearing that it's vibrant and people are learning and using it and it's growing and it's like reclaimed by Irish people, and I just think that's so beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, no, and I completely understand, and I think, that's an idea a lot of people have, and sometimes when I say to people I speak Irish, they say, yeah, English like it's spoken in Ireland, and I say, no, no, I mean, Irish, the Celtic language, Gaelic, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So no, there's definitely that idea is very common, and of course, when people visit certain places, they don't, when they come on holidays to Ireland, they don't know where the language is spoken. You might not hear it very often, kind of randomly on the street. You will hear it, but maybe not very often. So they don't know all the spaces that you get to know as an Irish speaker
Yeah.
that are really amazing. And as you said, really amazing things going on to promote the language and reclaim it.
Yeah. In Dublin specifically, what have you noticed about the usage of Irish and the usage of English? How
Mm.
are they together? How are they separate? And how do people feel about using Irish in such a big city like Dublin?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So, kind of thinking a bit back to when I was learning Irish and when I went to those summer camps in the Gaeltacht, where Irish is really, associated with the community. People think of, okay, who's speaking Irish? Some people think Irish is limited to those areas. And certainly when I went to summer camp there, I remember I'd spend 3 weeks talking to my friends in Irish, and we did I used to go with a group of friends from my town, and we'd speak Irish to each other all the time for 3 weeks, and we'd come back to my town, and we'd only speak English to each other. We'd just switch back to English. There was this idea that we speak Irish there, but here in Dublin, we don't.
Mm.
And then I ended up studying Irish at university, but I was very nervous about it as I was kind of approaching the end of school. I thought, I don't know, I'm from Dublin. I don't know if I'm good enough to be doing this. So we definitely have a lot of, there's definitely this idea that Irish and Dublin don't go together. That
Interesting.
that's still very popular, and even if sometimes when I've been speaking Irish to my friends in Dublin, if I'm maybe just sat on a bench in Dublin city centre, and people will come over to you and say, "Oh wow, you're speaking Irish." And they're very positive about it, and I think that's great. They want to hear the language, and largely you'll get comments like that, like, "Wow, it's brilliant to hear somebody speaking it." But they'll also ask, "Oh, and are you from the Gaeltacht?"
I
Um,
see.
and I say, "Oh no, I'm from here. I'm from Dublin," and it's a shock. And when I say, you would not think I'm from the Gaeltacht hearing me speak Irish, in terms of Irish speakers would not think I don't have, I don't use certain features associated with different Gaeltacht regions. So these are people who maybe, largely speak English, and their idea is, wow, if you're speaking Irish in Dublin, you must be from the Gaeltacht. So of course that's something that people are challenging at the same time. Like, there are thousands of people in Dublin who use the language every day. Aside from the education system, we have the education system where people are using it either
Mhm.
as a subject or in Irish medium schools where all subjects are done in Irish. And of course, people being raised in Irish as well in Dublin. But that idea is still there for
Yeah.
people, and you can see that it's still not normalized to speak Irish in Dublin, and like English is.
Yeah, that makes me wonder if there's a historical precedence, maybe that's the right word, a historical precedence of Irish being used in the countryside, or it's not, you know, is there like a stigma, or has there been a stigma of like people who speak Irish or quote unquote country folk, and they're not, cosmopolitan city dwellers? And does some of that still exist? Is that a thing?
Yeah, definitely somewhat that idea that, it's a language spoken in rural areas is definitely there. And things are changing. I think now people are recognizing, just how much it's spoken in Dublin and other urban areas in Ireland, in Belfast, especially, but I think it's important as well to point out that it's not new, like there's always been people speaking Irish in Dublin,
Yeah,
200 years ago, 100 years ago, 50 now, it's been used. It's, I think, just about, maybe because some people will say, Irish is having a moment, and I'm reluctant to frame it that way. But, maybe there is a moment of recognition happening.
I see. I see. And I'm glad you pointed that out, because I think that maybe the internet and social media, and there's more conversation from more people, so it feels like it's having a moment. It feels like this is a great big new thing that's happening, but it's been ongoing for a very long time. So it's really, I'm glad that you made that distinction for us.
No,
And
exactly. And you framed it very well there. And I think, you do see, I saw someone on Twitter say that, there was a headline that said, speaking Irish is cool now, or something like that. And they said, when wasn't it cool? Who decided that it wasn't cool when I was speaking it 50 years ago? So you're completely right. It's the kind of headlines of it all. But of course, it should also be acknowledged that there is amazing things happening.
yeah, in Dublin, when if you're walking around, whether you live there or you're a tourist, are you seeing signs and signage and the written Irish language around the city?
Yes. So in Dublin, the official signage is bilingual. So street signs will have the name of a street in English and in Irish. Um, and signs about maybe roadworks, you'll see them in Irish. Unofficial signs, like maybe shop fronts and things like that, are would mainly be in English. Posters and shops, information about prices, things like that would mainly be in English. But there have been gains made in that sense. There's a few campaigns happening. There's one Báilíocht le Gaeilge, Dublin with Irish, which is kind of Cunner na Gaeilge, which is a major Irish language organization, have this project where they're working on helping businesses in Dublin to use more Irish and embrace Irish in their business. So you can see now around Dublin shops that are participating in that campaign, for example. And there's an app as well, Gale Goer, where you can go on and see what shops you can use Irish in. So I can say, okay, I'm looking for a hardware shop, for example, and go onto the app and check if there are any hardware shops registered, and it will come up. Speak Irish with Sean, Monday from 2 to 5, Tuesday from 9 to 12. So I know I need to look for Sean and that he'll be working in those hours. So there are great things happening like that. But yeah, largely on the linguistic landscape, you'll see English.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait to visit. In Ireland, in and I'm gonna you tell me, should I refer specifically to the Republic of Ireland or shall I include Northern Ireland? I don't want to overstep what you feel comfortable talking about.
Yeah, so I mean, when I'm talking from my own experience, I'm mainly talking about the Republic of Ireland.
Okay.
I have done some work in the north of Ireland and in Belfast, but I don't think we'll be going into that. So.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure,
No,
find out
no, thank you.
where
Yeah.
you're comfortable. As you're moving around Ireland,
Mhm.
how have you noticed or do you notice that the Irish language changes?
Yeah, so it's generally considered that there are three major dialects of Irish,
Mhm.
Ulster, Connacht, and Munster. So Ulster in the north, Connacht in the west, and Munster in the south. So they'd be the kind of the major divisions you could make in terms of the type of Irish that you're hearing.
Mhm.
And some cities like Cork, for example, is in Munster and is kind of geographically closer to the Munster Gaeltacht, so you might hear more of that dialect. And Galway then is, beside the Connemara Gaeltacht, so you'll hear more of that, the Connacht dialect. So you can see the kind of nearby Gaeltachts having an effect on how the language is spoken in the urban areas nearby. Now, Dublin, there is a Gaeltacht area in County Meath that is a lot closer to Dublin, but Dublin is generally quite far removed from the Gaeltacht compared to other cities. So, and you hear a real mix. You hear it all. The people like me who have learned Irish in school and at summer camp, we've just picked up a bit of everything. Some people do feel more comfortable, maybe specifically learning one major dialect and learning pronunciation based on that. Others, like me, are very happy to kind of just take everything that people have spoken to us. And someone said to me once that the way we speak is basically how I want to phrase it. I will never phrase it as nicely as they phrased it, but something about how the way we speak is how everybody who has ever spoken to us is coming out through the way that we speak. And I really like that
Oh,
idea.
yeah.
That people have spoken to me, Irish speakers from all over the country have spoken to me, and the way that I speak is their voices coming out through me.
Oh.
Yeah, I quite like that idea, but some people really want to stick to one dialect as well. And of course, in Dublin, there's those of us that are from Dublin or from nearby, and then there are people from all over the country who move to Dublin for work, for studies.
Mhm.
Like all major cities, it has
Yeah.
huge immigration from the rest of the country. So, of course, there's lots of Gaeltacht speakers in Dublin as well using the language.
I love that. As you were talking, I did pull up a map so that I could follow along. um I don't think that you addressed this, but are people mixing? Are people mixing English and Irish together? Like if you're out with friends and you start the sentence in one and you end the sentence in the other, is that a common thing that people do?
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of code switching between them. That would happen everywhere. And then yeah, you will see as well kind of the influence of English, and how we pronounce things in English, as well on people's Irish. Yeah, for sure. There's mixing. And of course, that generates different feelings in the community. People have very strong opinions about what's acceptable and what's not acceptable in terms of English influence in Irish. Sometimes I think there is a tendency to consider these things mistakes,
Mm.
that I I sound like I'm from Dublin when I speak Irish rather than one of the major dialects because I don't know enough or I haven't practiced enough. And I think that's not really doing justice to the fact that I want to sound like I'm from Dublin when I speak Irish because that's an important part of my identity. So yeah, sometimes things are put down to mistakes when really it's about so much more than that. It's about wanting to express our backgrounds through the language. And that background for me has been a background in Dublin mixed with English. Yeah, so people have different ideas around that. There's also switching in terms, I have bilingual conversations with some of my friends where I speak Irish and they speak English. And we just that's how they can understand it because they studied it in school, but they're not confident enough to speak it, or it's not very fresh for them in their heads. So I speak to them in Irish and they understand me. They speak to me in English and I understand them, and we get on that way.
Where do we see, or do we see, words as they're developing in our collective vocabulary, coming into Irish? So words that, maybe words that are about technology, or words that are about, like something like mobile phone or internet, or do we, how do we introduce, or how have we introduced, because like you said, this is not a revitalization, this is an ongoing thing. How have you noticed, I guess, historically in the last, let's say, 50
Mm,
years, um,
mm.
like how are new words coming into Irish? Are they coming in through loan words? Are there Irish words that are being created to talk about new technologies and new ways of living as our lives evolve?
Yeah, so that's really interesting. It can it there's a few different processes going on. So there is an official committee that let's say I'm trying to, sometimes especially in my when I'm doing academic work and I'm maybe reading an academic text in English, um where a specific term has been used, and I'm trying to think, okay, how can I write about this academically in Irish? And I might get onto that committee and say, hey, has anyone thought about how to use this word? A lot comes from the community as well. So you really saw that during, with the COVID-19 pandemic, that, when it started, there was this need to get information out as quickly as possible. So certain words were put out there by the kind of official stream. But then words also emerge from the community of speakers as well. So there was, there can be some tension there as well. But largely, in my experience, the kind of committee is quite open to suggestions, is quite open to feedback from the community and adapting based on community use. And there's a really amazing project actually called On Folklore Atach, or the Queer Dictionary, where people are kind of compiling LGBTQ plus terms in Irish.
Right.
And it can surprise people sometimes when I'm teaching Irish and I talk to students and I tell them about these initiatives. They're surprised that such things are going on. But such amazing work to make sure that the language, that we can use the language and also talk about our range of identities. It's really special.
Yeah, I love that. I love when that's happening. And
Mm.
I didn't even think, I mean, shame on me. I didn't even think, but especially with the LGBTQ
Mm.
plus community, the inclusive language needs to be there. And
Yeah,
it's really important that they're focusing on that to make sure that people can express themselves as they desire in Irish, in their language. Like that's so
exactly.
affirming. Yeah.
Exactly. That it's not just people think that maybe this debate is happening with English, but it's happening in the Irish language community as well. And
Now that I'm thinking about it, like, is there a non-binary, like pronoun that we're using in Irish, and how is that expressed?
Yeah, so people will use she'd, which is they, the same way as in English, and that's becoming more accepted.
Right.
In terms of because we do have masculine and feminine nouns. So,
Yeah.
uh, if someone said teacher, for example, is a masculine noun, so some people will automatically use the masculine for teacher, for example, and then over the years. People were demanding more to use the she, no, she, the he or she, and now it's a lot more natural to use she'd. At least that's what I'd be using and what a lot of people would advocate for. So yeah, it's a similar debate, I would say, as in English, but definitely movement on that front. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us about, well, tell us about your work. I know that you mentioned that you were studying the urban speakers of
Mm.
minoritized languages, and I'd love to know more about that and maybe what you've uncovered, what you've learned, and a bit more about that dynamic.
Yeah, so that's something that I've been thinking. I was thinking about it in the Irish context for a long time since as soon as I went to the Gaeltacht and started thinking about my own connection with the language and what that has meant. And when I think about my own family background as well, so the kind of the last person that we can find in the family that was probably a first language Irish speaker was my granddad's grandmother, and she moved from what is now a Gaeltacht region to Dublin, and that was the last that we know of her speaking Irish. Was when she moved. Moving to Dublin meant saying the end of her speaking Irish as a main language.
Hmm.
So a lot of, as well as kind of my life, but also the experience of people in my family has been one that being in Dublin meant speaking English, and that's something that is really sad. And on an individual basis, on a family basis, on a societal basis, it's really sad. So yeah, anything that I can do to get around that and question that idea that it has to be like that is something that I want to get behind. So with my research, I'm looking specifically at Irish speakers in Dublin and Valencian speakers here in Valencia, and how they use the language, how they challenge the idea that English in Dublin and Spanish in Valencia needs to be dominant, and how they sort of question how we live in cities as well. There's, in terms of the all of the issues that capitalist globalization, urbanization brings us. In the language movements, that's something that speakers are giving a lot of thought to in terms of how we want to live as urbanites, how we want to live. So yeah, looking at all those questions, how people how people are aiming to create new spaces for the language to create new ways of living in the city as well.
Yeah. What have you found as far as how it affects urbanites?
Yeah, so the people that I interviewed for my thesis, for example, are all people who regularly use the language. And I did walking interviews with speakers. So we went around the city and people showed me places that they associate with the language. So I think for me, something that really came across with those interviews was just the variety of spaces and the variety of ways that people are using the language. There's um so much more than even I, who is very positive about the chances of finding these spaces. Even I was amazed at how many places Irish has been used in Dublin, for example. There were spaces that I never knew. There used to be a restaurant there where people used to speak Irish, or in Valencia, someone brought me on a really lovely walk around an area called the Rusafa, which is kind of a very tourist hub now, and a lot of places that are being turned into Airbnbs, and that's a whole topic when it comes to the language. But he brought me around this area of Valencia and showed me all of the places there used to be a cinema, when he was growing up, maybe 60 years ago. And all of these places that he used to use Valencian in the community. So all of those places that the language had been used that you wouldn't know if you just looked at them, you wouldn't, it's impossible to know. So I think that's something that's really come out. All of the places that over the years have been touched by the language in some way is really amazing. And then, yeah, as well, what I was saying around kind of different ways of living in the city. So, for example, at the moment in Dublin, there's work going on to set up an Irish language area where Irish speakers can live together and raise their children in Irish. That's something that happened in Belfast that has been really successful. So looking to kind of do that in Dublin, where there can be a street or a neighborhood where people's children can go out and speak Irish to each other on the street and, just live in community and not be so alienated from each other that city life can sometimes be just really connecting through the language. And someone else said to me in the interviews, for example, that as a woman, one of the only places they feel safe in Dublin is in the Irish language pub because they know that they can talk to anyone and there because even if they don't know them, they're a fellow Irish speaker. So they have that sense of connection with the person, that sense of community just by being an Irish speaker. So yeah, how these places can be so much more than places where the language is spoken, but actually ways that point to how we can live in community and feel less alienated. That's something that really I find amazing.
I think so too. And especially that community where you can raise your family and you have other families living intentionally in the same way to
Yeah.
not only the language but also the culture. Well, obviously it's a village. It takes a
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I remember so, there's been so, it's something that people are debating and it's in very much in the early stages of development at the minute. But and some people were saying, well, I don't live like that. I don't talk to my neighbors. And other people were saying, well, yeah, but wouldn't it be nice if we did? Wouldn't that be a better way of living?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think those kind of projects are the ones that most inspire me. The ones that aren't about, living for profit, but
Hmm.
living for community. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Oh man. I think especially now with everything, with the world being the way it is, like we need our neighbors. We need one another. We need to know, you know, I don't know. I've been watching a lot of Law and Order, so I'm also like, wait a minute. Maybe that's not a good idea. but, but
But
I
I
could
know I completely understand. With a whole other way of living where that's
exactly.
possible.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
Um
yeah. I was just reminded. I actually saw. I've used this example a few times. I've put the picture up on my Twitter that I saw graffiti or kind of urban art in street art in Valencia during my field work, and um it had kind of faded off the wall at this point. It was in another part of Valencia where there's a lot of Airbnbs called El Carme, and it had sort of faded away, but you could sort of tell that it was two women talking to each other sat on seats, which is quite common. You see that in Valencia, where you walk through the streets and people come out of their apartment blocks with plastic chairs and talk to each other out on the street. It's very nice and something that when I saw this street art suggests that people see as sort of fading away as an activity. And there was a speech bubble between them in Valencian, and it says, "Ya no li podrem demanar sal a les veïnes de la Porta 5." So now we're not going to be able to ask the neighbors in apartment 5 for salt, with the idea that apartment 5 is probably an Airbnb. And the fact that it was in Valencian was very powerful for me because it was, not only can we not ask them, but we also can't speak our language to them either.
oh,
So yeah, those criticisms that are coming out of the urban communities that are criticisms of larger ways of urban living, I think are very inspiring and important. And that's something I'm trying to get out with my
yeah.
thesis, I think.
That's so interesting. Like, well, because especially because that street art, it's so layered. There's so many
Mm-hmm.
layers there, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it says a lot about what Airbnbs and temporary housing does
Mm.
to our communities. It
Yeah,
prices us out, but it
yeah,
doesn't just price us out physically, it prices out our culture and our language and, things that have been built for generations.
yeah.
Um, wow. That's so like I never even thought of that. And I talk about language every day. I
I
never
know
even like
it is amazing. And I think that was something that really, I went into the field work with a certain idea of what I'd be looking at and more around the lines of what I was talking about earlier of kind of, people being questioned as Dublin speakers or, kind of ideas around those sort of language ideologies around who is a legitimate speaker. And it's turned into something very different because of those conversations where people pointed out what's been lost and and they were sad conversations but also very inspiring because of what people are doing to ensure that these spaces or that maybe emerging spaces are represent different ways of living and different ways of doing things
yeah,
in a world of many crises. So it's I think it's important to get the message out there that those things are happening and those conversations are happening. And I'm just endlessly inspired by the people that I met.
absolutely. I'm inspired now too. This is
Good.
like and I think it definitely, it definitely relates to where I live. It relates
Mm.
to, my hometown, which is here. So it's ooh, Alexandra. Something to think about. Something to think about for the rest of the day. I have a question, and maybe this is inviting controversy.
Mm.
But I am curious, are there, and you can relate this either to Irish, to Valencian, or to both, but I am curious
Mm.
to know, are there dissenters? Are there people who say, we don't need this language, it's not that important, why are you even giving this any of your time?
100%. Yes,
Okay.
definitely. There is that in both contexts. You'll find that. Um, and it's something that sometimes have no choice but to engage with, and that's the context in which I work. But I try to just ignore Twitter comments in that in that ilk. But there definitely is, and it can be very, sometimes we think about it, it can be annoying for sure, but there's also danger in it, and in the Valencian context, there's some of the people I've spoken to have felt very threatened by people, when they've gone into a bar and spoken Valencian, and they've been treated very badly for doing so, and sometimes been kicked out. People have been kicked out, and it's still happening. And even quite an extreme example is that during my fieldwork last year, it came out that there had been a police spy involved in kind of different movements in Valencia, particularly kind of movements around access to accommodation and even food banks, and I mean ridiculous. So and that was very much, there was a linguistic element to it in that the person had been sent from another area where Catalan is spoken and had been sent then to Valencia to spy on behalf of the Spanish police. So there's real danger for people. There's serious political consequences for people. And I've been quite lucky I haven't myself, but even my partner, who's a Valencian speaker, we love this food that is called bunyols, or like little donuts made of butternut squash, and they're amazing. I never really thought of butternut squash as a dessert thing. That wasn't something I was used to, but Valencia has changed my life in that sense. But so yeah, these bunyols. Anyway, we went to order these bunyols at a stand, and my partner said, "Oh, mitja docena de bunyols." And the guy said, "Not if you're speaking that language to me," or something like that.
Oh,
So you get, and then my partner switched to Spanish,
oh
and the guy
no.
was still going on about how you know, how dare he speak Valencian to him, essentially. So yeah, you get, and it generates a lot of bad feeling. It can be quite scary, and you're in a vulnerable
Yeah, of
situation.
course. Yeah.
So yeah, that's something that I've definitely seen.
That's crazy because uh, do people like not, maybe they don't care, maybe just people just don't care, and it's so disgusting to me, but like the history of language suppression throughout Spain and also in Ireland,
Yeah.
like this is not ancient history, it's
No.
recent. And
No.
for people to react to your partner in that way, like, and to feel vulnerable if you want to speak your language and someone may try to harm you or try
Yeah.
to implicate you in a crime or something, like we've been over this, people, like nothing good comes out of that,
Yeah.
and it's, oh my God, I'm so
Yeah.
sorry that happened.
I know, and it's and in so many of the conversations I had with people, especially in Valencia, they had experienced it to some extent or another. Even if it was just feeling that discomfort that you feel when you try and speak the language, in situations where maybe it hasn't been associated. And in Dublin, in Valencia, there's a lot maybe bigger of a movement to stick to Valencian, so speak the language and continue speaking the language, even if someone speak Spanish back, you continue speaking Valencian. Then there would be in Ireland where, a lot of the people I spoke to might say hello in Irish, goodbye, thank you, things like that, but largely will speak English in places where the language isn't known as being spoken there. So yeah, maybe we see it a little less, but I'm not sure that we would if we maybe persisted with the language a little more. Um, I don't know what kind of backlash we'd face if we did that, but it's there's no doubt that those feelings of trying to speak the language, if I think, oh, I want to speak Irish in this shop, but I'm not sure, that there's no doubt that you feel that discomfort that comes from the situation of inequality, and it's difficult. It's yeah.
Wow, that's like a whole nother layer of, just getting on with your life.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
people shouldn't have to think about that just to ask for like toilet paper off a shelf. Like you
Yeah.
shouldn't have to. Oh my gosh. And I
Yeah, and
real
even there have been cases in Valencia of, there was one man, I think it was last year, maybe it was the year before, of a man who had gone to his doctor's clinic and was told to leave because the doctor didn't want to see them, they were going to speak Valencian to them. And then when he went out to discuss it with the secretary, they ended up phoning the police on him. And anyway, this came out in the news, and there was a lot of talk about it. But that's the sort of thing that happens, and it's awful. It's awful.
this makes me very sad.
Yeah.
And I realize that the privilege that I have sitting here and being able to talk freely about these things and criticizing the way that I'm seeing people react to this stuff is coming from a place of privilege. Like a lot of people don't have the ability to even give their opinions on what's happening with their language. So I want to acknowledge that, um regardless of how I feel, like there's a lot of people around the world who can't um really express their feelings openly. So
Yeah.
wow. We didn't even talk about Valencian as a language. Like what? So I was reading, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I was researching a little bit, but people were saying that online, people, Wikipedia, not people. It wasn't like it wasn't Twitter or something. But that Valencian is like a related to Catalan somehow, or like linguistically, they're very similar, or I could be misremembering, but I would like to know, is it similar to Catalan or is it similar to any other minoritized languages that are in the region?
Yeah, so it's a Romance language, and there is debate about whether it is a variety of Catalan
Right.
or whether it is a separate language that's very closely related if it is a separate language, but that we maybe should consider them separate languages. So that's something that is very highly debated and comes up quite a lot, especially in Valencian politics. But it's among the people I know, it's generally accepted that it's a variety of Catalan. The kind of circles that I move in, I acknowledge, are are more, I suppose, yeah, more. Yeah, it's generally considered among the people I know, and at the university certainly, that it is a variety of Catalan.
Okay.
So there would be some differences, in terms of certain words used in what in Valencia, certain and other ones used in Catalonia, and um, and then. And of course, so much of the discussion around whether it's the same language or not also ties in around identity in the Spanish state and Catalonia's independence and the very diverse and tense confrontations that happen around that. So yeah, there's a lot of debate on that, but they're very similar. Very just a few minor differences.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, when I heard you speaking, the few sentences that you
Mm.
shared, I was like, oh, this sounds familiar
Yeah,
to me. I don't
yeah, for sure.
I don't speak Catalan, but I've heard it through doing this show, and I'm like,
Mm.
oh, I can hear a little bit of maybe even the tonality, like the way that you spoke it.
Yeah, and I'm sure with you, kind of improving your Italian, for me, it's been amazing. Because I spoke Spanish before I moved to Valencia, so and of course the Romance languages, you could, there's a lot of intelligibility between a lot of them, but um, when I when I learned Valencian, I noticed that suddenly my comprehension of Italian is so much better than it was when I just knew Spanish. And same with French. I now read French a lot better. So it's been very interesting for me to see that my level of Italian and French, which is non-existent, has somehow improved. So
I
that's been
love that.
great.
I love that so much. It's amazing how when you learn one Romance language, the others to varying degrees kind of fall into place. So
Yeah,
it's and then for me, I feel like it gives me such a false sense of um, confidence because I like to fool myself that I understand and I can speak Spanish and I can't. But it's like it's very contextual, but I am the most confident non-Spanish speaking person that you'll ever meet. But I really do need to step into a classroom or get a tutor or something because it's long overdue for me to learn Spanish and but yeah, I love that, Romance languages kind of follow the formula and you can very easily relate to them if you need
for
to in a
sure, for
pinch.
sure. And even what I also find interesting when I come across words in Valencian that are a lot closer to the English than the Spanish would be. So even um advantage, for example, is avantage.
Ah,
Whereas it's ventaja in Spanish. So I love those words where I'm like,
yes.
wow, I have such an advantage, such an avantage learning this language. I love that.
Absolutely. I
And I
love
think as well, one of a big thing for me is that I really have always struggled with the double R in Spanish. I can't pronounce it. It's been I started learning when I was 11, and so it's been 26 years and I still can't do it. So I think that we can count that one out. But I love words that in Spanish have the double or. And when I say or, I mean R. That's what we call it in Ireland. But the double or, and in Valencian they don't. So when I'm talking about my parents' dog, I don't have to attend the double or that will be there in Spanish. I can just say gossa in Valencian. I love that. I love when that happens when I'm like, wow, my life has
Oh.
been made so much easier by this.
I love that. I love that so much. It saves you. It saves you some, extra. thinking about having to roll your R's and get that double R out. So you could
Exactly. It's
just
it's
avoid it.
great. It's great. And that's why it's interesting for me because, there's a sense maybe that if you're speaking Valencian and someone wants you to switch to Spanish, that, they want the conversation to be easier for them. And with me, sometimes I want to say, trust me, if we did this in Spanish, it wouldn't be better. It wouldn't be easier for you. So it's interesting from my perspective as
Yeah.
well how how sometimes people might not think that as someone from another country you speak the language. But really it's been an amazing experience for me. And it's funny sometimes when usually I get by fine speaking the language, but I remember once my dad was visiting me some weekend last year, and there were a few places that, a few restaurants that we'd be speaking English to each other, and then I'd turn and maybe order something in Valencian, and it like didn't compute. It was like, how could you be speaking English and now speaking Valencian? Like that doesn't work. What's that about? So it's interesting to see that as well, and like having that perspective as someone from another country who's learned the language. There's a
Yeah.
lot of interesting things there. Yeah.
I love it. I love that. I would love to know some things that you enjoy about the culture, Irish culture, Valencian culture. What are some things that excite you? What are some things you're proud of as an Irish speaker, as an Irish person, that you want people to know about as a Valencian
Mm.
resident? What do you want people to know about? Anything you want to share with us?
That's a great question. I think a big thing would be on the Irish language side. I love surprising friends and family with the diversity of things that happen in the Irish language community, especially fun things as well, because a lot of people have the idea that, maybe they studied it in school and they didn't really enjoy the experience or didn't enjoy school full stop, and Irish just kind of becomes a symbol of that. And so I love telling them, oh, what are your plans on Saturday? Oh, well, I'm going to a rave in Irish. I love that. I love being able to, I've been to a few raves. Like that's the fact that I can go to an Irish language rave, I think is something to be very excited about. And it was a big moment for me. When I was in Dublin last year doing the field work, I was there for 6 months, sort of trying to. I always attended Irish language things, but really going all out with my attending of Irish language things. And there was one day that really affected me emotionally, which was that I got the train into the city, and went I went to the cinema to watch a film in Irish, Tarek. It was called, a really beautiful film. And there was something about sitting in a cinema in an area of Dublin where a lot of my family had lived, and the north side of the city that would be considered a very working class area, knowing that I was probably the first person in my family ever to be able to go to the cinema and watch a film in Irish. Um, it was so huge for me that I was able to do that. So yeah, I love telling people about all of the amazing things happening and all of the opportunities that I have as an Irish speaker that they wouldn't think exists and hasn't been open to them in the past. I think I love that. I love that.
Oh.
And then for Valencia, it's been amazing for me being here. I absolutely adore it here in general. Um, I think there's been a sense of freedom for me here, in terms of, particularly, I always considered myself sort of, I had very strong political opinions, and sometimes growing up in Ireland, there was a sense that, we don't do maybe strong debate, that, there's sort of a quiet conservative streak. So for me, being able to, being here has meant really being able to be far more open about who I am as a person, and some of my ideas about how life should be in my ideal world. Um, And even things as small as, that I'm vegan, for example, and I meet a lot of people here who are very, around maybe the bullfighting industry and all that. I meet a lot of people who are happy to stand up for what they believe in. And that's not to say that that doesn't happen in Ireland. Of course it does. There are huge, there are amazing social movements happening there too. But for me, Valencia has represented a place where I can just be more open and yeah, freer around my ideas and connect with more people on those on that basis, which has been
Yeah.
really great.
It sounds like you're planted in the sun and now you're growing, flourishing.
Exactly. Yeah, that's how I feel. That's how I feel. It really, being here there's also, it should be said, there are definitely challenges. I don't want to
Oh, yeah.
and in terms of for people living in Valencia, there's huge challenges around housing, around the cost of living, but compared to Dublin, for me, it's an easier place for me to live in
Yeah.
Valencia for sure. I couldn't live the life I live in Dublin.
Yeah. Just want to ask you really quickly, one Irish food, one Valencian food. What are you choosing?
Okay, so for Valencian, I have it very clear. And
Okay.
it's a controversial question, so maybe I shouldn't be this clear. But there are two rice dishes that are well known in Valencian: paella, which of course is well known everywhere, and arroz al forn. And I am on team arroz al forn.
Really?
I really am. I really am. And I love a paella. It's not to take anything against paella, but arroz al forn is, which is basically rice with different types of meats. My mother-in-law uses vegan meat, so it doesn't need to be meat. Put in the oven, tomato, chickpeas. I love it. I love it. So that would be my Valencian choice. Irish choice, that's a real struggle trying to come up with something
I'm sorry.
something that I like Irish food wise. Oh, it's I yeah, it would be a struggle. Maybe I could say, I don't think it's necessarily Irish, but things like apple pie and that kind of baking. I definitely liked different baked goods I had growing up. My grandma used to make apple tart a lot, and my mum makes a really nice apple tart. So I suppose when I think about good Irish food, I think about baked bread and an apple
Mm,
tart.
hmm. Baked bread, Irish baked
Yeah,
bread
that. Yeah,
is
exactly.
yum.
Yeah, that would be my food recommendation for Ellen. Just go to the bakeries. There is an amazing bakery in my town, and my town down at Bahach or Donabay isn't usually well. It's got things for tourists, but it wouldn't really be on the tourist map. But it's got this amazing bakery with an Irish language name actually on Bacchus Biog, the literal bakery, and it does amazing baked goods. So I might as well shout them out while I'm here.
Yes.
So when I think about good Irish food, I definitely think about them as well. And
Yum.
it's even a bonus that they have a positive attitude towards Irish too.
Yes. We love that. I'm adding that to my list.
Excellent.
When I
Yes. And there's beaches, there's a lovely park as well. So it's worth a visit.
take my bread to the beach, if I don't.
Yes, exactly. Mind the seagulls, but
Yeah, I was gonna say I'd have to share it with the seagulls. No, they're not sharing it with them. It's all mine. Tell us about your work with the ELP,
Hmm.
and a bit about what you do with them, and if you want to share about how to get in touch with you or how to contact you, let us know that as well.
Yes, so I've been with the Endangered Languages Project since November 2022, when I started working as a language revitalization mentor. And I knew about ELP before that. I'd been to events, and they had a festival of Indigenous languages in 2020, yeah, at the beginning of in January 2022 that I had attended, and I automatically fell in love with the organization and everything that it represents. It's really such an open community for people to come together and discuss our experiences and share stories and ideas from across the world around promoting our languages, around language revitalization, documentation, everything that goes with it. So, as a mentor, then I am basically there as a sort of point of contact. So, anybody around the world who wants to talk about the work they're doing, they might have questions, they might just want to tell me about the work what that they're doing, and we'll have that conversation. And I always love to hear about what's happening in different communities. So yeah, can contact me, and we the idea is that we can share learning resources, ideas and experiences from our own communities. I'm part of a team of mentors. So yeah, that's been amazing. And so yeah, anyone who's interested in mentoring should definitely get in touch. I'm Alexandra at endangeredlanguages.com. But there's also a section on the website if you want to book an appointment with any of my colleagues too. Mentoring is available in 11 languages, including
Oh,
Irish. Yeah, it's a really great opportunity to connect, because sometimes this work can be, I suppose there's two things about it. One is that this work can be hard. Well, it can be hard for sure. It is hard, and it can be very lonely. But we're not alone, and it's good to have a space where we can be together, as a global community, and reflect on what we're doing. And then the second thing is that, I've been really lucky that, I'm a PhD candidate. I've got access to really great education around minoritized languages, but the access to resources on these issues, and access to linguistic training is very unequal, unequally distributed throughout the world. So for me, it's really important to be able to to share what we've learned as mentors with a broader audience.
yeah. Thanks so much for sharing that. I will add links to those platforms in the show notes for this episode so that people who want to get in touch with you can just click and write you straight away.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, send me an email or book an appointment. I'll be very glad to talk to anyone.
Yeah. This has been such a fun conversation,
It
Alexandra.
really
I've
has. It's been really lovely to talk to you.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. And I learned so much and I have so much more to think about, with things that you brought up. And I'm always happy personally to be in a place where I can learn more and I can educate myself, because we all have to educate ourselves
Mm.
too. So thank you so much for this.
Thank you, Gurmila Maga.
I like to end each episode with the same question, just to have some fun and to
Hmm.
learn something. It's fun, but it's also educational. Do you have any jokes, popular sayings, tongue twisters, cool slang words, idioms, words of wisdom, or words of advice in Irish or in Valencian to share and to teach us?
Yes, I decided to combine expressions with tongue twisters. So some expressions that I find at least a little difficult to say when I try and say it fast. So I have one in Irish and one in Valencian. And even though we just spoke about sun, and I'm definitely, I'm looking out the window and it's 25 degrees Celsius right now, very sunny. I was reading on the balcony this afternoon. I don't know why I've chosen expressions that are related to rain, but maybe it's the lack of rain that's inspired me to think of it. So the one in Irish is Ulk Shean an Shuck is far Shuck na Schnachte, agus is far Schnachte na Sheer Vastach. So frost is bad, but frost is better than snow, and snow is better than constant rain. So, and unfortunately, constant rain, sheer Vashtoch, is very much something we have to deal with in Ireland.
Mm.
Not so much in Valencia. So that's what the next one relates to. So the Valencian one is a Valencia blow bog, pero bog que blow bro. So, in Valencia, it rains. It doesn't rain very much, but for the little bit that it does rain, it really rains. So,
Aha.
so two rain related expressions that are also a little difficult to say.
So This is the part of the show where I want to try to say one of those things.
Excellent.
Which one would you like to teach me?
Um, we'll go for the Irish one. Why not go for the challenge?
Okay,
So
now,
with this one, we're really going with the sh. That's the sort of repeated sound that's coming up.
okay.
So we have the first bit before the first comma. Ulk shean on shook.
Alkshian on shock.
Perfect. And then we have before the August, the AGUS, we have Isfar Shuk na Schnachte.
Is far shock na
Schnachte.
schnachte.
Excellent. Yeah, brilliant. August is Far Schnachte.
August is far schnachte.
Na Sheer Vostach.
Na sheer baksta.
Excellent. That was brilliant.
Oh my goodness.
So Ulk Shean on Shuk is Far Shuk na Schnachte.
Alkshian on shock. It's far shock na snak. Oh, I forgot already.
Yeah, no, that's good. Schnachte, yeah.
Schnachte. August is far schnachte na sure shock.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, exactly. Na sheer Vostok. Perfect. That was good. That was great.
This is my first experience reading Irish and being coached on the pronunciation of Irish, which is beautiful and fascinating. So I feel like I'm having a good day so far.
Yeah, I think that's excellent.
I love to do this at the end of every episode because I think it's important to try, especially when there's a language you don't have any experience in. Like, it's easy to be afraid and to see something
Yeah.
unfamiliar and say, oh God, I'm not doing that. Like, I can't do that. But
Mm.
no, you can do it. You can try. It's important. And I think that speakers of the language will probably at least get a smile.
Exactly, absolutely. And I say that in the classes that I teach, in the Irish classes as well, that, students I'm teaching at the minute, beginners Irish classes, and, there's such reluctance to give it a go. Because they're nervous about pronouncing it wrong. And I always say, there's very few pronunciations that we won't already have heard as Irish speakers. So just go for it. We'll probably be able to understand it because we get why you might be pronouncing it that way. So we'll be able to get it.
Yeah, and you can only get better. That's the only
Exactly.
option. So you might as well go for it.
Exactly. That's it.
Well, thank you so much for this conversation again. Before I let you go, you're in Dublin or you're in Valencia, whatever,
Yes.
and you've been having a conversation with someone for quite some time, a lovely conversation about all the things. But it's time to go your separate ways in Irish or in Valencian or wherever you are in this scenario. What is the best way to say goodbye?
So for goodbye in Irish, we're saying slán. Slán.
Slán,
Exactly, perfect. And then for Valencian, adeu. Adeu.
adeu, adeu.
Yes, exactly, perfect.
Slán and adeu,
Yeah,
Alexandra. Thank you.
slán, adeu.
Thank you so much for this, and I'll be talking to you soon. Bye.
Thank you so much, slán.
New episodes of Speaking Tongues are available every Monday, 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and to like and share episodes with other language lovers like ourselves.